All right.
Let's see.
Tess, are you ready for us to call the meeting to order?
Let me write one quick note. Joan A. and meeting. Yes.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. and take attendance. Tess,
Here.
Kelly,
Here.
Ren,
Here.
Sean,
Here.
and Catherine is here. And it looks like right now we've got one member of the public in attendance. Okay, first up is review and approve committee minutes. Motion A, approve the GTLNC January 4th, 2022 Governmental Affairs Committee minutes. Do I have a first?
First.
Was that Tess?
Yes.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Sean.
Thank you, Sean. And we'll open discussion on this. As you all recall, this was postponed for a vote in February because there were concerns about whether or not it was quite accurate. Tess and I did go back and re-review. What was said at the meeting was simply reading off what the summary of the proposed standing rules were. And we asked if there were any comments. And at the time, no one disputed having two board members request agenda items, but obviously there is some disagreement on that point. But when it comes to the minutes, at least, it is reflective of what was said in the meeting at that time. So I will open it up for discussion. If you're a member of the public, feel free to raise your hand.
I'd just like to say that while I did review this set of minutes carefully, I think generally our minutes, both the full board and the minutes, are too verbose and too elaborate and need to be boiled down to the minimum. So I'm going to abstain tonight on the minutes. And that will be the reason.
Okay.
I will, Ren, you and I go back and forth on this, and your comment is fair. I simply disagree. I think, some level of detail is good, especially when we're dealing with something like this. So I appreciate your comment, and I simply don't agree, but that's our differences. Okay.
Jonathan, I see your hand up. You can go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to simply say that when a group of people all sit in the same room and hear a recording, it's not unusual for 5 people in a room hearing the same thing to believe they've heard something different. So that the minutes reflect something about 2 board members. I don't think that's necessarily the authority on the matter. I was at the meeting, and we can open it up for a talk again, but I would simply like to state, just because something's in the minutes doesn't necessarily mean that that's what was said. I mean, we could go back and listen to the recording, but here the real goal is to get the best possible document in place for the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will remind everyone that for the minutes, it is reflective of what was said at the meeting, not necessarily if there's been a change in opinion. Kelly, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that 2 thoughts about elaborate minutes. One is, and I know this is possibly going to be changed by this committee, but our bylaws previously talked about brief minutes. And then secondly, the other thing that I've always been concerned about when the minutes get exceptionally detailed is that they appear to be a transcript, but they're not a transcript. So I always thought that kind of maybe gave people the impression
Just see the light on, that's all.
that they were a transcript. So, and I just worry that that might confuse people. So,
Yeah,
and
and Kelly,
we have recordings of the meetings, so they can always go there too, you know.
I do agree with you on the transcript question. There are some times when some of our previous minutes were incredibly detailed and also wrong. They appeared to
Yes.
quote me saying literally the opposite of what I had said.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
There've been some past meeting minutes which were literally 30 pages long. I couldn't believe it. So, but
Yeah.
that's, I mean, I don't, this isn't that level of detail. And, I guess both points of view have their merits. Anyway, you know how I feel about it, but thank you. Thanks,
All
Kelly.
right. Well, is there any further discussion on specifically the January 4th minutes? Hearing none, seeing none, let's proceed to a vote. On motion A to approve the January 4th governmental affairs minutes. How do you vote, Tess?
Yes, approve.
Kelly?
Yes.
Ren?
Abstain?
Thank you. Sean?
Yes.
And Catherine is a yes as well. Motion carries 4-0-1, which brings us to motion B, approve the GTLNC February 1st, 2022 Governmental Affairs Committee minutes. Do I have a first?
First,
Is that Tess?
yes.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Sean?
Thank you, Sean. Any discussion on the February 1st minutes? Hearing none, seeing none, let us proceed to a vote. On motion B to approve the February 1st governmental affairs minutes, how do you vote, Tess?
Yes.
Kelly?
I was excused from that meeting, so abstain.
Thank you. Ren?
Abstain?
And Sean?
Yes.
And Catherine, I'm a yes as well. Motion carries 3-0-2. We're up to date on minutes.
Just for
Which brings-
it's Catherine, just for specifics, Kelly's being excused that's an abstention? Is that what you said, Kelly?
She said she was abstaining, yeah.
Okay, all right, got it.
Because she wasn't at that meeting.
Okay.
Right.
Got it.
And there's not an obligation right now. It's not a rule that you have to abstain. It's a best practice unless you have listened to the recording. But yeah, it's.
Okay.
All right, which brings us to public comment. As our sole member of the public, Jonathan, do you have something governmental affairs related that is not on this evening's agenda? All right, you have 2 minutes.
I do. I would like to mention that I don't think any committee ought to be meeting in Greater Toluca Lake at this point in time without having something specific on its agenda that addresses the fundamental primary concern of stakeholders, and that is public safety or the rise in crime. I think specific to this committee, what continues to lack is any comment out to the city council about the Gascon policies and the COVID restrictions, which were specific that I brought up before in my conversation with the chief Mohammadi that we spoke about at the general meeting. The police specifically specified that these 2 points interfere with law enforcement. The very least the neighborhood council can be doing is to be picking up on that signal that something more needs to be done at very minimum, just to communicate outwardly towards city council. It wouldn't hurt to address their own level of crime indictments. Thank you. That's the
Okay,
end. That's the end.
thank you. All right, any committee member news and announcements related to governmental affairs?
I have a few. So, actually, this is on the agenda later, so I'll wait for the Toluca Lake Post Office update. But in addition, some of you may have seen Adrian Nazarian announce that he's withdrawing from the race with Laura Friedman. So he has decided not to seek re-election to the new 44th Assembly District. So what remains to be seen will be interesting. I think people should be aware of that. Also, we had a West Toluca Lake Residents Association neighborhood watch meeting last night, and this relates to public safety specific, what Jonathan was mentioning. We had nearly 50 people there, and it was, I think, an important coming together of the community to raise awareness of what we can do together. I'm happy to share agenda and discuss that with anybody who may have an interest, who is either on the call now or listens to the recording later. I can be reached at tess.taylor@gtlnc.org. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, any other committee member news and announcements? All right. Which brings us to the bulk of our business this evening, bylaws. So as you all know, at the last general meeting, which was held February 15th, we passed a proposed bylaws amendments draft. Afterward, we were contacted by Dunn and set up a meeting to talk through some things that Dunn requires us to change because they are outdated language, as well as some other recommendations that they have. So I can go ahead and share my screen at this point. For anyone that's a little bit confused, hopefully it's clear that the document that I am going to be sharing on the screen right now, it has been basically accepted the changes that were made at the February 15th meeting. So those all appear as if they are regular text. And then any new changes appear as red line type changes. So with a red text and a strike through if it was removed, blue text with an underline if it was added. So hopefully that's clear.
Catherine,
Yes.
You did see Erica Gattaca's email, I think, to us just a few hours ago.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll bring that up at the appropriate juncture. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess my first question is, does anyone have questions or concerns about these proposed changes?
I will bring up the, I think the most important point, which is agenda setting. Now, Catherine, you and I discussed this before the agenda went out. And just to quickly review, I knew I was certain that we had discussed and agreed upon the one person setting the agenda. And since I couldn't find it in the audio or the video at the time, because I was, between things, you suggested putting it in and that it could always be changed later.
Yes, but that's in the standing rules test, not in the bylaws.
Okay. All right. Well, I think it's gonna come up. So we're just gonna stick with the bylaws now.
Yeah, we're discussing the bylaws.
Okay.
And I guess you're right. Let's go ahead and actually open this motion. So motion C, recommend additional bylaws amendments red line draft for adoption by the GTLNC. Do I have a first to open discussion on? Was that Tess?
Me, Tess, right.
Thank you. If you can say your name when you
Okay.
first or second. And do I have a second?
Kelly, second.
Thank you, Kelly. Great. Okay, so discussion on the bylaws. Now, are there questions, just general clarification questions about how this red line draft works before we begin? Does everyone get what we've done here?
Let's see. what is the date up at the top? Because I have so many versions of this, the one that you're looking
The
at now.
date should be February 25th. And if you open it up, it should say cleanup on it at the footer of each page.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Got it. Okay.
All right, so a couple key takeaways. The youth board member will be selected in accordance with the midterm vacancy procedure, which is now defined in the vacancies section. And the reason this is proposed is because there was some concern and pushback about the idea of taking away the president's selection power. So for midterm vacancies, and since a youth seat may be a midterm vacancy, it will be in accordance with this midterm vacancy policy, where the president will nominate an individual from the eligible candidates that submitted themselves for consideration. The board has the option to confirm or reject that individual. However, for annual meeting vacancies of officer and committee chair positions, those are selected from amongst candidates at the meeting by vote, not the president nominating an individual. So this is sort of a middle ground that we're hoping will allow people that at the previous meeting did not support the original proposed vacancy. We're hoping that this will be more amenable to them. Does anyone have questions or concerns about that?
I was trying to read it when you started scrolling.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
It's
So
okay. I'll just open my own local copy. Okay, so I just want to look at it one more time. Okay. Da-da-da. Okay. So da-da-da-da. Ren, how do you feel about this? You're muted, Ren. Ren, you're muted.
Okay, actually, give me a chance to clean all the profanity out of my comments. No, seriously, I think it's okay the way it's written. I think it'll work.
Okay. Let's see here. The nomination may be confirmed by majority vote of the board. May is
that word was used in order to say that the board does not have to confirm. The nomination may be rejected as well.
okay. Sean, how do you feel about this?
I was actually had concerned about May, but the way that Catherine kind of pointed it out, it kind of actually makes sense now. I'm actually more concerned with the agenda settings based on what I would. So I'm actually okay with this at this point.
Okay.
I'm more concerned with the agenda settings and what the question that I have. So I'll kind of hold up for that.
Jonathan, how do you feel about this? I think he has his hand raised.
Yep. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay, I was saying, am I unmuted? Because I didn't want to start talking and then have to start again. We're not here to we're only looking at the language at this point in time. Truthfully, I don't care what the language says. What mattered to me, and I want this said in front of all of you, is a democracy or a representative democracy always safeguards certain things. And one of the things it does is it makes balances of power be, it avoids putting abilities and power choices and certainly selecting people who vote on the shoulders of any one person. And this is exactly what I saw the board do. And it's not at all satisfactory. It's unacceptable to me, but this is what you all as the board members have decided. In the rule of law says, whether we like it or not, that's what happened. But because that happened, I remember my point was a negotiation, meaning in order to move this forward, we got to give something up. This is what they want. And in return, each board member should have the ability to agendize. So I'm anxious to get onto this agenda because I'm not at all comfortable with what's going on. I feel like there's a screw job going on. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Okay. This vacancies voting procedure is basically identical to what was originally proposed. Oh, Kelly, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say that the 2 points that were most important to me in this section were that everyone was made aware that there was a vacancy and that the board could vote on it. And since both those 2 pieces are there, it's good.
Yes, that is something that has not been really well publicized in the past, is that there even is a vacancy and people
Correct.
would be eligible for running.
And
Correct.
may I say something that I thought was a little odd? Correct me if I'm wrong. We
Mhm.
had several board members object to the proposed language. And
Mhm.
that was, so the language we had was rejected. And then when it came to voting on that change, that
The whole bylaws.
well, even though the change that they rejected was left out, they still abstained from approving it. Am I misremembering?
They actually voted no on approving it, several of them.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what their other objections were to the bylaws, other than just a general disapproval of the idea of removing power from the president.
All right.
Okay, do we want to change this may to be the nomination would be confirmed by majority vote of the board?
Seems good to me. Would be.
Would
Will.
be.
I mean, would be definitely, it leaves less ambiguity.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch it to would be, just to make sure that we don't have any unnecessary confusion. Apologies for the incredibly loud truck outside my window. All right, in the absences policy, we were advised that we should include how someone will be notified, both verbally and in writing, was the recommendation from Dunn, since some people don't check their email regularly. But it's also good to have it in writing so that there is a proof of that communication having happened. So that's what we did. And we also included the clarifying language that removal due to absences does not require censure first, which is in line with Dunn policy and with the censure clause or section in the bylaws. So that's a pretty simple change.
Okay.
All right. This was another change on page 12, the officers section. They advised us that this is actually a city clerk funding division requirement. And I see there's a weird typo that happened here, so we'll fix that. Okay. Really innocuous change, I think. For selection of officers, we'll go ahead and put back in the reference to the vacancies section now that we are improving the vacancies section so that it includes both the midterm vacancy, which will be nominated by the president, and the annual meeting selection by the full board from amongst candidates. Again, I think this is a relatively innocuous change. This is something that I think might be a bit of a sticking point, but I promise you, Don told us this is what needed to happen. In the committees section, first of all, we've moved the committee quorum definition here. We were advised that it's best to keep all that stuff together. So that was moved out of the quorum section and into this. But the big change here is that for the agenda setting, we were told by Dunn essentially that there needs to be a clearly defined so-and-so sets the agenda. Now, the way that Dunn explained it to us is if you say it is in accordance with the standing rules, then the committee chair has to follow whatever the standing rules are in setting that agenda. And so essentially, if the standing rules say the committee chair prepares the agenda using things that were submitted to them, that's what the committee chair has to do. It's a semantic question of what set means, but Dunn was pretty emphatic that we needed to define a person or persons that set the agenda. So the committee chairs set the agenda. Are there questions or concerns on this front?
Okay, I'm just checking my notes from that meeting. Hang on a second, Catherine.
So the current draft for the agenda setting says the executive committee shall set the council meeting agenda in accordance with the standing rules. That's correct.
Yes.
And then the one just below that, the red line where it says the committee chair shall prepare the agenda for the respective committee meeting in accordance with the standing rules. Now,
so that was removed, and it now, if you go up one page to the committees section, because we were advised to just keep all the committee stuff together. In the middle of that page, letter
under D? Yeah.
Yeah.
Special meeting. Okay, so regarding our meeting with Dunn, I don't have specific notes on them being that emphatic, Catherine, but each shall, the committee chair shall set the agenda.
So that was taken down below, but moved up above, if I'm not mistaken.
That was removed from the agenda setting section and put specifically into the committees section, because we were advised that it's best to keep all the committee rules together in the committees section.
Well, we also discussed last week or at the last meeting, and Ren brought this up in terms of timing, getting an agenda, having a committee member submit.
And Tess, that's all covered in the standing rule.
Okay,
that we were proposing.
I just want to make sure. Okay, so shall set with the standing rules. Okay, as long as any committee member can submit an agenda item, that's important. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's clear it says committee chair or chairs shall set the agenda for the respective committee meeting in accordance with the standing rules, but that says committee chairs. So the goal was the committee member or the committee chair?
The committee chairs set the agenda, and they are doing it in accordance with the standing rules, which we have on our agenda tonight to pass a standing rule where items may be placed on the committee agenda by committee members.
Yeah, so we're covered.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my concern. Thank you.
This was the big, I know we previously had a semantic conversation about like set versus prepare, compile, whatever word we wanted to use. And what it came down to was during our conversation with Dunn, we spent like 10 minutes of them saying, but who sets the agenda? And we were like, if we put the word set in it, they're like, yeah, you should say who sets the agenda. And we're like, okay. So that's why that's where it is here now.
That's fine. I was just concerned that the biggest part of it, and say I missed it because it's tough to continue to read this over and over again. And so I'm doing my part, and I know it's what I need to do. I was just concerned because a portion of it was then missing, but then you then brought it that it was just moved. It wasn't missing, it just was relocated.
Yeah, and that was sort of a fluke of the way that copy paste and stuff worked in the red line, because sometimes it appears green instead of red. But yeah, so, and that is the big change in the agenda setting section, is once again, it now says the executive committee shall set the council meeting agenda in accordance with the standing rules.
And that's with
And
respect
so-
to the general board meeting?
The general board meeting, yeah.
Okay. Should it maybe then be a little bit more clear, because it is left a little bit, I mean, I don't know what other people think, but maybe it should be a little bit clear that the executive board will set the general board meeting minutes versus the committee chairs will set the committee meeting minutes. That makes sense? So that there's a clear definition of who does what and when. And so I just don't know what everyone else's thoughts are on that.
Clarity is always desirable. So in which paragraph are you looking at? Section 2 here? The executive.
Section 2. Yeah.
Yes.
If you,
Yeah,
just-
I would say the council meeting, yeah, the general board meeting agenda, or
you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that maybe we should better define, or specifically, since seeing as how this is a very it's been a very contentious subject. I want to make sure that we get it right, and that we never have to bring it up again.
Yeah.
I would just think we've gone this far. Let's just get it through the finish line by making sure that it is overtly clear. That's just me personally. I just want to just make sure that, and please, I want
Jonathan,
everyone else's opinion.
I see your hand is up. You can go ahead.
Hold on a second. Let me just change screens. Okay, I'm also looking at the agenda setting under the meetings. So it has to do with the general meeting. The sentence reads, the executive committee shall set the council meeting agenda in accordance with the standing rules. That's everything having to do with the agenda setting of the general meeting. That's the spirit that I didn't want. In other words, it's a spirit that says the executive committee has control over the agenda. Yes, it says in the standing rules, but if you remember how we started out way back months and months ago, we were talking about other neighborhood councils that say things like an agenda item shall be sponsored by any board member.
And Jonathan, the standing rules that we're proposing do say that.
They do, but this sentence says that the
As we
executive-
said before, Jonathan, to be clear, we were told by Dunn that we need to say so-and-so sets the agenda. We need to have the word set in there. They seemed very focused on that word. And so, as they said, whoever sets the agenda has to follow the standing rules. And if the standing rules tell them how to set the agenda, meaning they have to take anything that is submitted by board members, then that's how they have to set the agenda.
Perhaps this sentence might read, the executive committee shall set the council meeting agenda that shall be in accordance with the standing rules. It's a big difference, meaning it's accentuating the fact that it is not optional.
I disagree.
I don't even like the
changes
sentence
the
because
meaning
I
of the
think what you're
sentence.
doing is, okay, I understand you're getting a directive from Dunn that you want to say who shall set the council meeting agenda. But a long time ago, we were comfortable with the president doing that based on certain criteria. At no point did we ever agree that the committee will have some sort of a committee function other than review it. So it doesn't even sound compatible. In the standing rules, they're allowed to review it. Here, they're setting it.
I took some pretty detailed notes at my meeting with Dunn and with Catherine and Dunn, which happened last week. And quote, set in accordance with the standing rules, end quote, they say needs to be clarified. And suggested language was that the executive committee shall set the agenda in accordance with standing rules, which detail how board members, can propose an item. So that is those are my notes from our meeting.
They didn't say it needed to be clarified. You wanted it to be clarified. in a different way. You were proposing extensive language, but
Well,
I mean,
we could, actually, I think that's from Dunn themselves, from Thomas himself. But we can add a clause there. The executive committee shall set the agenda in accordance with the standing rules, comma, which detail how board members may agendize an item. That, that was discussed. So I would be comfortable with that. And I think that would go a long way toward getting this done.
how do other committee members feel about adding that phrase at the end?
So what was, could you repeat it for me?
Sure.
What did you say?
Okay, so the sentence exactly as it stands here, which has been added, the executive committee shall set the council meeting agenda in accordance with the standing rules, comma, which detail how board members may agendize items, period. How do you feel about that?
I personally do not feel that it provides, that it really changes the meaning of anything. And, depending on what the standing rules say in the future, it may be outdated language at some point, but
Also,
I would
so that I
personally
understand.
oppose adding that in. I just don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, I don't see that it adds much or anything. So I wouldn't add it in.
Sean, Kelly, Jonathan?
Well, this is Kelly. I feel like if the whole point of my understanding, and tell me if I'm wrong, is the difference between the standing rules and the bylaws is that the bylaws are like that sentence, right? As it is in blue right now. And the standing rules talk about the details of how you get to this blue sentence. So I don't necessarily I think this is more in the spirit of what bylaws are supposed to be. Plus, I like it because the standing rules do change how we're doing it. So I think it's good. So I don't know that we need any more clarification. And I'm the most, I'm extremely adamant about this needs to be changed and that the whole council needs to participate in making the agenda for the board meetings. But I think this does that.
Okay.
Sean?
Sean?
Sounds like, go ahead, Sean.
No, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Well, I was just going to say that it sounds like 3 out of the 5 committee members don't support adding in that. So it wouldn't pass as a amendment to this draft. But Sean, if you have an opinion, please, I do want to hear it.
See, again, I'm kind of with Kelly on this. My concern is my overall concern, and the thing is, I kind of see it both ways. So maybe if someone can give me this view that I'm missing, but I see it kind of going both ways. I'm all about the opportunity for any one of the committee members to be able to have the ad opportunity. And while it is kind of not, I don't want to say broad, but if we could, well, it would be nice to be able to see the standing rule. I guess it's very clear what the
I can
bylaws
put up
state.
the standing rule. If this would be helpful, up on the screen right now on the share screen, you can see what we're proposing, which is
I'm actually pulling it up now.
For the general board agenda, items may be placed on the general board by a committee chair submitting an item generated by their committee or by written request of any board member. So singular, any board member. There is a timeline of 1 week prior to the meeting, and then the executive committee is responsible for ensuring agenda items are compliant. Likewise, for committee agendas, the item would be placed on the committee agenda by written request of any member of that committee. And again, 1 week prior to the meeting, and the committee chair is responsible for making sure the item is compliant.
And I want to make sure you see that we have 2 people with their hands raised, Catherine.
Yes, I don't know. I think, is Jonathan's hand up anew or was it already up from before?
Jonathan? And we have Lee Jameson here as well.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah,
Yes,
you're
you
unmuted.
are.
Perhaps you would consider the executive committee shall set the council meeting agenda, including board member items in accordance with the standing rules. It needs to say something more than the executive committee shall set the council meeting. It's just going against the whole point of everything is to it's to enshrine it in the bylaws that board members shall be creating their agenda. This is your chance to put it in there. The meeting agenda, including board member items in accordance with the standing rules. There you have it.
I agree with that.
Lee, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, can you copy me now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, great. I just want to let you know I'm on board.
On board with the
I mean,
proposed
I'm logged
change?
in. No,
Oh, okay.
I'm monitoring you guys, what I'm trying to say.
Awesome.
All right. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to what Jonathan was saying, I would love to have the board members included in that sentence.
Is there any reason why we can't add that without
Yeah,
making it?
There's no reason that we can't have that.
And is there any opposition to that? Because I'd like to hear the reason or the reasoning behind the opposition, if anyone has any.
At this point, my main opposition is just overcomplicating this, and
Adding
it
a few
already is
words-
referencing the
Catherine,
standing
adding-
rules.
Adding a few words is not a complication.
I mean, at the end of the day, it'll get us moving forward because, and again, I think we should, I'm not asking anyone to compromise anything that they believe in. I'm just saying we should have something that has that flexibility so that we have the opportunity to move forward. So that's all my,
right.
so that's all.
So
I'm
if it
saying. Kelly,
says,
I was just going to see if Kelly could pipe in, just get
Yeah.
someone who's got.
No, I think if it makes people feel like, look, the last thing I would want is for the standing rules to get rewritten so that the president can set the agenda again, right? Like, I really want this change to happen. So what I'm hearing is the other people I know Catherine does too, I know many of us do, but what I'm hearing is some of you feel that if we just leave this blue sentence as it is, we are jeopardizing the ability in the future of board members being able to help set the agenda, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, a couple of extra words here. The executive committee shall set the council meeting agenda along with, I don't know what the exact.
comprised of board member submitted items in accordance with the standing rules.
Yeah, that works.
That works.
That works fine. And just so that we're clear, with respect to the bylaws, that's not an easy change because we get it right with the bylaws and we have it approved with the bylaws. It takes 2/3 of a vote to change it, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Versus the standing rules, what is the, and please forgive me.
It's a simple majority.
Simple majority. I think if we get the bylaws right, it'll make it more difficult to change in the event that things change in the future. Not that I don't have the faith and trust in anyone to, do the right thing. I have full faith in everybody. And I think everyone has the same agenda and wants to move forward. I just think that it holds more weight in the bylaws than it does in the standing rules.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and say the executive committee shall set the council meeting agenda, comprised of items submitted by board members in accordance with the standing rules.
Awesome. That's huge.
Okay.
Ren, do you have any
Great.
thoughts on this? Sorry, I just wanted, because I just want someone just like the people who have more knowledge than me. I just want to get their opinion.
Yeah, I think if you put it into the bylaws as opposed to the standing rules, you protect that just a little better. That the
Perfect.
committee members have a chance or an option to add things to the agenda. So, you know, if that's what you're going after, why it's a little stronger if you have that in the bylaws.
Good.
Awesome. Thank you, Ren, for your input. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ren. Jonathan, will that make you happy?
I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Okay. Can you repeat that sentence one more, or it's the sentence exactly as it stands? The executive
The
committee.
executive committee shall set the council meeting agenda, shall set the general board meeting agenda comprised of items submitted by board members in accordance with the standing rules.
Sounds good. Yep. I like it because it also, yeah,
Okay.
because it now has teeth in both the bylaws and in the standing rules. Awesome. Good work, people.
All right. Compliance. So this was partly from Dunn. Again, the verbal and written notification that someone is going to be up for consideration for removal. We also sort of adjusted the way it says when you are allowed to vote. So in order to vote on issues that come before the council, all board members are required to complete the mandatory trainings as prescribed by da 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 da. That then allows for any sort of rules about, you know, if someone can vote on certain items but not funding items, et cetera, depending on, you know, what they've completed. It's just following the Dunn and city rules. And we also added in the censure is not required prior to removal due to failure to complete training, which based on what Dunn sent us today, I believe is correct because this is a requirement that we're making and therefore censure is not required to remove for failing to complete this requirement. So Jonathan, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'll put it down. It was up. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right, any questions?
So we're consistent with Dunn's directive. The language,
I believe so.
yeah, the language that Erica emailed us today, should that go into the bylaws or the standing?
That already is in the bylaws. That is in the removal section.
Okay.
Apologies to everyone for the scroll that's happening. It's right here. It says that this policy, the removal policy, is not intended to restrict neighborhood council's ability to remove board members who fail to attend meetings, the attendance thing, join committees, maintain their stakeholder status, or perform other duties. That's where this comes in, as may be described in the bylaws or standing rules. So failure to perform the duty of completing training is how we would sneak in with this clause.
All right, good.
All right, and I believe that took us to the end of these bylaw amendments.
Yay.
Which brings us to a vote.
Jonathan just raised his hand.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that something Tess had said was kind of important, and I don't understand the human psychology behind it, but it was Matt who raised the bylaw amendment, and then Kevin Dees, and then in the end, after it was amended, just like we see in Congress in the United States, they got their amendment and then they voted against it. That's what Tess was referring to earlier. Thank you.
Oh yeah. It felt very 2008 ACA to me, but
Okay.
whatever. Well, we'll move forward. Hopefully we found a middle ground now. All right, so we'll proceed to a vote on motion C, recommend additional bylaws amendments red line draft as amended. for adoption by the GTLNC. On motion C, how do you vote? Tess,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Ren,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. Motion carries 500. This will be up for a vote at the general board meeting on March 15th. Which brings us to the standing rules. So we have motion D, recommend standing rule agenda setting for adoption by the GTLNC. Do I have a first to open discussion?
Yes, Tess.
Thank you, Tess. And do I have a second?
Sean.
Thank you, Sean. So I'll put it up on the screen. Again, standing rule for agenda setting for a general board agenda. Items may be placed on the general board agenda by committee chairs submitting items generated by their respective committees or by written request of any board member. Agenda items should be submitted to the executive committee at least 1 week prior to the meeting. The executive committee is responsible for ensuring all agenda items are compliant. Committee agenda. Items may be placed on a committee agenda by written request of any member of the committee. Agenda items should be submitted to the committee chairs at least 1 week prior to the meeting. The committee chairs are responsible for ensuring all agenda items are compliant.
I'm good.
Sorry, go ahead.
I said I'm good with this.
Okay.
I have,
Kelly, was that you?
yeah, it's Kelly. My only thought is that items may be placed, make it sound as if it's still up to the president to decide.
Can we change may to, well,
Will,
Yeah, that would be good.
can-
Do you want to
Oh,
say are items are placed on the?
I like R.
are, will, shall? Because may, again, the problem with may is may leaves a question. May, maybe, maybe not, maybe so.
Right.
I think shall would be best.
Okay,
I think shall is very definitive, so that's just my personal.
Sounds good.
great.
And
Jonathan, sorry, hang on one second. Sean, go
No
ahead.
problem. Me or Jonathan?
Yeah, Sean.
Okay, I did have one question, and this is just kind of just off a little bit of a tangent. I'm not going to try to break it off too far. What if there's a situation? I understand we need to have that 1 week prior. In what scenario does, let's say, you need to like something that will give us an opportunity to bring something up that's really important, but we are under that like 1 week limit? Is there something we have that kind of allows for that just in case there's like an
So
emergency?
that's where the
or-
word should is a little bit of wiggle room. Agenda items should be, not must be.
Okay,
That's how we put wiggle room in there. I will let Jonathan speak, but I do have a follow-up related to special meetings. So Jonathan, go ahead.
Am I unmuted?
yes.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thanks. I could never tell because I have to change screens. Two things. I completely don't like the use of the word may in rules and regulations. There are very, very few places where the word may should show up when you're creating rules and regulations. It should always be shall, because that's definitive. May is a permissive tense. My other point on this is it's been written in the passive tense. It's as if someone spoke Yiddish who wrote this. It's always in the passive tense in Yiddish. So what that means is you're saying items may be placed on the general board agenda. You're not saying who shall place the items on the agenda. It's a passive tense instead of active. And the problem that leads you to is you end up reading the paragraph not knowing to whom, from whom, and to whom the action occurs, because it's a passive. The glass was placed on the table. Who put it there? In this case, the items are placed on the general board, but there's missing information. To whom and from whom should be what's going on. It should be the subject of the sentences. who shall do what, if it means writing, to whom. So that's how it should read.
That's a good point, Jonathan. I should have picked up on that myself, but yeah. The active.
I don't know that I think it's unclear.
Who is
maybe
the
not in
board
your,
member giving it to?
they are submitting it to the executive committee. It says agenda items should be submitted to the executive committee. And for committee agendas, agenda items should be submitted to the committee chairs. It is there. It's the second sentence of each of these.
Oh. Placed.
It's heavy. It's not simple.
Items shall be placed. Well, if we say items are placed, shall be placed.
Well, it says, so if we have as shall, items shall be placed on a committee agenda by the written request of any member of the committee. That sentence to me is clear.
Yeah, it's clear to me too.
Wouldn't you want to say committees or any board member shall place?
It should be any committee member. It can't, I mean, if I'm not mistaken.
So I think at this point, I am going to pretty firmly disagree with Jonathan about rearranging the sentence. Yes, active voice is better than passive voice, but honestly, in this case, I think it's clearer in this form.
So items shall be placed on a committee agenda by the written request of any member of the committee. So that's pretty straightforward. It's painful that Jonathan brings up passive versus present. It takes me back to school. But that's good work on your part, Jonathan. I appreciate that. I really genuinely appreciate that.
You want to break down the sentence structures?
Oh God, no.
Do a map.
I would. Well, this is like philosophy. I remember like the truth of a sentence. That was even worse. But I think the first sentence, if we have shall, I think that makes it pretty straightforward and cut and clear. If everyone agrees.
Yeah, I think shall is a good adjustment there.
And then we should.
Do you want to say compliant with done, or do you just want to, does the word compliant mean the same thing to everyone?
Compliant is meant to encompass the various things that we need to be compliant with, which includes done policy, state policy, like the Brown Act, and just generally that the items are complete. I know, Jonathan, you've had issues in the past with NPG applications that were incomplete and therefore non-compliant. So that's why it's sort of broadly written and compliant with our own bylaws.
Can I ask you a question, Catherine?
Yes.
When I looked up the word compliant in the dictionary, I thought it meant only legal, but evidently it means compliant with one's emotions too, or something like that. Am I wrong, or what do you think about that?
That's a good question. I'm gonna actually do that right now as we speak.
I mean, you can be compliant in that you are deferential to something, like emotionally.
How can we word this to mean strictly legally compliant, which is the goal? In other words, I don't like a situation where the executive committee has enshrined in the bylaws and the standing rules the ability to rewrite agendas based on their emotional needs or their personal agendas. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Is there a way we could make this
I
confined
feel
to
like
legal?
you're reading something into it that no one else would, Jonathan.
I wish I was. I wish it was just me.
Jonathan, what language would make this clearer to you?
Here, I thought compliant meant legal. And then when I looked it up in the dictionary, I was the one who originally used it and brought it here. But when I looked it up,
Compliant
I
with all
discovered.
applicable rules.
Yeah, you know what, Jonathan, I will respectfully disagree with you here. I think compliant
All right, I'm okay with it, as long as it means the same thing to everyone here. I
Yeah.
didn't,
I think, and I will say this, I think compliant, I think just on a facial, everyone kind of has a good idea what compliant means. And I do agree that with Tess on this. And Jonathan, I do agree with what you're saying, but up until you pointed it out, I thought compliant was more of a not necessarily a legal thing, but I'm not able to articulate, but I get what you're saying. But I just looked it up and I didn't see where it said anything about emotion. So I'd really like to see your definition. So if you get the chance, forward that to me. I'd love to take a look at that. But I think it's okay as it is.
It's just my command of this word. I didn't know, I thought it meant only legal, but if you're all satisfied that that's what it means, just legal,
I think
I'm all right.
this is Kelly. What I would say is that compliant works in this context because it is because of the context. So,
Okay.
if it wasn't in standing rules, then it might mean something different. But in this case, it's good. And another way of writing it would be, all agenda items comply with all rules, but that's just redundant. It's
Right.
redundant because of context. So that's why
Okay.
compliant works here.
I'm satisfied. Thank you.
So I know that this is probably going to be unpopular. I was going to propose that we go back to what was originally proposed by request of any two board members, because I suspect that will be more palatable to the rest of the board, and could potentially alleviate any concerns about an overfull agenda that we can't get through in one meeting. I don't know how anyone else on the committee feels about written request of any two board members.
Without having to rehash or spend too much time on it, there was a lot of pushback on this at the board
Not
meeting?
on this specifically, but just generally the board had a contingent that felt we were taking too much power away from the president and giving too much power to the board, and that it was just going to become overrun with, pet issues and everyone needs to have a say in a way that prevents function from, being expedient.
The pushback came with the filling of the vacancy far more than with this. And, while your rationale, Catherine, when we spoke last week, is solid, I think having slept on it, a better position would be to stick with one board member agendizing something. And if there is tremendous pushback, then we can, fall back to the two people. But I mean, the whole idea is to enable people to agendize something. And at such point as we have 400 items on the agenda, then we can start to winnow things out and address which items will receive priority, assuming we do get too many agendized items. And frankly, that's a far smaller concern to me than any individual board member not being able to agendize something in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably just look at history and the number of things that have been suggested for agendizing. I mean, that should just, in and of itself, that should tell you what we need to do. This just gives the opportunity for something to happen in the future.
And I doubt that we're going to have a rush of people agendize something in the near or even medium or distant future. People have been perfectly happy to let things run their course. So it looks like Jonathan has his hand up.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
I would only add, I know this comes as a surprise for some, that there is an upside to having two board members sponsor an item on the agenda. And that is that board members are encouraged to talk to each other in advance of a meeting, because sometimes that could save a lot of this disorganization. There's so much disorganization in these meetings. The downside is that you ought to give it a try to see if each board member can be responsible for their own sponsored agenda items. But It's not the end of the world if it takes two. Thank you.
Ren, go ahead. You might be about to say what I was about to say.
Yeah, I actually agree with at least two people signing off on these things. I can picture a particular board member, for whatever reasons, getting very tied up with a particular issue and having 5 or 6 or 8 or however many items on the agenda, all sort of around the same subject, but each requiring a process and a vote. It could get pretty ugly pretty quickly. And one of the things that we have to worry about is at some point, board members may get just frustrated and tired of attending meetings and having to, go through over and over again particular issues or particular points of view that have been clearly voted down in the past. Nothing here that precludes somebody from presenting the same motion each month, for example, or a whole bunch of motions. Anyway, I think 2 is better than 1.
All right. I will say what Jonathan said about board members talking to each other before the meeting was interesting, because we're actually not permitted to talk to multiple people about a topic that's going to be on an agenda. So like 2 people would be reasonable to submit an agenda item, but you don't actually, per the Brown Act, you're not supposed to be talking about things that are going to be on the agenda prior to the meeting as like groups of 3 or more. At least that's what we've been told in our training.
Of course, they're not on the agenda till at least 2 people put them there.
True.
Well, I think the prohibition is against serial meetings and against, organizing a vote prior to the agenda. So I don't think even 3 board members discussing something would be problematic. So, but listen, I mean, I could live with 2, but my preference is 1. And if we put
why don't we do a quick vote of the committee on 2 versus 1?
Okay.
So we'll start with you, Tess.
What are we voting on exactly? Well, I want 1.
Just a number. Yeah.
1. Okay. Kelly.
I want board members to be able to help compose the agenda. So if two board members makes this pass, then I would go with 2. It's just to be expedient to get it to happen.
And I'm not saying it wouldn't pass with it written this way.
Well, I guess then it's more of a strategic thing in terms of presenting it, because if we start with 1, we can compromise at 2.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So we have 2 votes for 1. Ren.
2.
Sean.
1.
And I voted for 2. So that means that 3 votes for 1, we keep it as is. And this is a bargaining chip we have at the general board meeting.
Yeah, because I think we're all heading in the same direction.
Yeah. The other item that I was wondering about is right now we have the executive committee setting the general board agenda, but in the event we have a special meeting, how do we want that meeting agenda to be set? Do we need to have something that specifies, the president, or in the absence of the president, the vice president is responsible for setting the special meeting agenda?
Oh, that's a good question.
And how that gets composed, because with a special meeting, if it's happening on short notice, it wouldn't necessarily have time to go to the executive committee and then to, follow all the Brown Act requirements.
Is there a way that
for special meetings, the agenda is set by the president or the board members calling the meeting.
That's a good question.
Via delivery of written notice to each member of the council.
President, we're doing the meeting, we call a special meeting at any time with written notice. Should the written notice also, well, should the written notice also contain the proposed agenda items, or should that be sorted out at the time of the vote?
What do you mean at the time of the vote, at the special meeting?
Yeah, I mean, what was the language you?
Well, there has to be an agenda for the special meeting.
No, well, didn't you just have something else up on the screen? Or am
Yeah,
I-
so these are the bylaws.
Okay. Right. Okay, so here it is. Okay, the president or majority may call a special meeting. Could they set the agenda at the time of the written notice?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying is we would want to go ahead and for the agenda setting standing rule state that at the time of or for a special meeting, the president or the council members calling the special meeting shall set the agenda and include the agenda at the time they are delivering written notice to each member of the council.
Yeah, I think that would satisfy me, but a president or a majority of the council members, and the majority suggests to me that a vote has taken place as to whether the special meeting is even wanted or not.
So that could happen, for instance, at a board meeting. Someone could decide we need to hold a special meeting about this, and the council members could vote to hold a special meeting, and then it will officially be
It's almost like we need a special meeting
by delivering the written notice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good with that. That set the agenda and submit it with the written notice of the meeting once the majority have voted to do so, to have a special meeting. Sean, are you good with that?
President.
Yeah. No, I mean, I get it. I was just trying to wrap my hand around it because it almost, in a way, it's almost you need a special meeting for the special meeting. But
So this is actually something that maybe we should clarify. For calling a special meeting by a majority of council members, as opposed to the president calling a special meeting, that could be done as a vote at a general meeting, or could be done as a request to our done rep, which is how it was previously almost done, but did not actually happen. If a majority of council members write to the done rep and request a special meeting, then that would also be a way for a majority of council members to call a special meeting.
Do you think that it needs to say that in there?
Yeah, I think we should probably put that in the standing rule for how agenda setting happens. So for a special meeting, if called by the president sets the agenda and is responsible for ensuring all agenda items are compliant. If called by a majority of council members, the agenda will be set either at the time of a vote, at a general board meeting and distributed in writing and if it is by written request to the department rep and will be set and distributed in writing by the department rep. I'm realizing now you guys probably can't see what I've been typing.
Nope. But I've been following along with you because you were typing out loud, which is nice.
Let me stop share. We'll switch to a Word document. Okay. All right. Try this again. Okay. So you all get to see how terrible my typing is.
That's why God created spell check. You're fine.
Yep. All right. So we can clean this up a little bit. If the special meeting is called by the president sets the agenda and is responsible for ensuring all items are compliant. Is responsible for distributing the agenda in writing and ensuring all items are compliant. If it's called by a majority of council members, the agenda will be set either at the time of a vote at the general board meeting and distributed in writing by the secretary. And if it is by written request to the department rep, then it will be set and distributed in writing by our department rep. Does that make sense?
Hold on, let me just read it. Let me either set. Either in, yeah.
Yes. Thanks for that. You were actually, when you put in the board, I was just thinking that you just, yeah. So good work.
I think that's clear.
I think that's okay. It just has to be, either or has to be in there.
Okay.
Or maybe just between the two paragraphs, you could have or. Yeah, never mind.
Yep. All right, Jonathan, I see your hand is up.
Keep it,
Yeah.
the structure, I would just simply say the president shall set the agenda of a meeting he calls, called by the, I can't see it anymore because you moved it and it's too small. But anyways, my point is just to keep it subject, verb, object stuff. The president shall set the agenda, and then whatever you want to say.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. We can clean this up and make sure the spelling is correct
Yeah,
afterward, but are we all good with adding in
I
this special meeting language for how it gets set?
And we'll change it from passive to active voice too. That's good. All right.
We'll figure this one out. Okay. Great. Any further discussion on the proposals for the standing rules? The standing rule agenda setting.
Not for me at the moment.
All right, then shall we proceed to a vote? On motion D, recommend standing rule agenda setting as amended for adoption by the GTLNC. How do you vote, Tess?
Sorry, one more time, Catherine. I just blanked out.
We're voting on the agenda setting standing rule.
Yeah, Ed, I vote yes.
Okay, Kelly,
Yes.
Ren,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
and I, Catherine, am a yes as well. Motion carries 5-0-0, which brings us to motion E, recommend standing rule vacancies for adoption by the GTLNC. Do I have a first to open discussion?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Tess. Do I have a second?
Kelly, yes.
Sean,
I think I heard Kelly. So Kelly, you got this one.
go with that.
All right. I'll just bring back up the Word document in case we make changes to this one as well. All right, for standing rule vacancies. In accordance with the procedure defined in Article 5, Section 6, vacancies of the bylaws, the council will provide application instructions and deadline on gtlnc.org within 24 hours of the notice of midterm vacancy and include notice in all GTLNC newsletters distributed during the application period. Eligible candidates will only be considered if a complete application is received within the application period. Candidates shall be notified within 5 days of receipt of application if there are issues with their application. Candidates are responsible for providing remedy within the application period and do not receive an extension to provide remedy. The nominated candidate statement will be made available on gtlnc.org no fewer than 24 hours prior to the meeting at which their nomination will be considered. It's a little bit bigger.
Jonathan, did you have your hand up again? I think he did.
Jonathan?
Thank you. What Catherine just read, my question is, who is notifying the person that their application is not acceptable? But also, Catherine, when you start to answer that, can you tell me this one page that we're seeing as standing rules, is this joining to any other existing document, or is this it for standing rules at this point in time?
Right now, we are proposing these two standing rules because we think they're important enough that we want to make sure they're passed at the same time as the bylaws. But there are several more standing rules that we've discussed at previous meetings that we want to pass. We just really don't want to overload the meeting.
Okay.
With ones that we think are important, but not as urgent as these particular agenda setting and vacancy filling ones.
And to dovetail onto your comment, Jonathan, you and I discussed this, Catherine, like if the candidate submits an application within the 5 days, but there turns out to be a defect, but that is not discovered by the recipient until after the 5-day period is over, that's not really technically the fault of the applicant. So that has to be clarified because somebody has to have.
I mean, right now it's clarified that you don't get an extension. So if you don't turn in your application until 2 days before and then there's an issue, you should have turned it in 7 days before, you know. It might be harsh, but you know, I think, but to Jonathan's point about who notifies, do we want to say that the president notifies, since they're the one that is, you know, theoretically receiving these, reviewing them and selecting a
Why not?
nominee? Sure. Okay. Candidates shall be notified in writing. Oops. By the president. Why is this caps?
Just to mess with you.
Okay, so that's the change we made. In writing by the president within 5 days. Do we feel that there should be an extension if a candidate applies in the last couple days and there is an issue, or do we feel that it's the responsibility of the candidate to apply earlier?
Well, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say, I guess it's kind of circumstantial, because if there's been a decent amount of notice, then just like, you should, if there's been a decent amount of notice, then if you didn't fall within the guidelines, that's kind of on you. I guess it's just dependent on how much time they've had in the process. If it was, so I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so keep in mind that we have a minimum of 20 days for the application period. So this could be as few as 15 days. And therefore,
that's 2 weeks in a day.
Yeah, that's 2 weeks. So
I think 2 weeks in a day. I think that's good. Me personally.
I personally do too, but I'm also a little bit of a meanie when it comes to this sort of thing.
This is Kelly. I guess I would say I'm okay with it as well. Although you kind of want it to be in the spirit of, inclusion, like the spirit of having as many people as possible want to be involved. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I just don't want it to seem unnecessarily like rigid or overly, controlled.
Yeah, I get that too.
Yeah, the thing is, we can laugh at somebody's inability to fill out an application or understand what it means to be a stakeholder. But yeah, I'm inclined to give just a little bit of leeway here so that somebody isn't bumped on a technicality. I side with Kelly on this. I think, well, my point is the person has to get the application in on time. But if a defect is discovered on the part of the council or the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, for that matter, I think it's incumbent upon us. I would prefer that the applicant had an opportunity to cure and correct or to provide a remedy. That's all. That would be my preference.
And maybe in extenuating circumstances, if there's just a level of apathy, do they then get a pass? Not that you could determine apathy at that point. I'm just saying, should it be maybe? I get you, Kelly. I really do. That actually makes sense, because I think in the spirit of inclusion, I think it's a great idea. I really do. But we're kind of almost splitting hairs, so I don't know where the line should be drawn.
Well, I was just going to suggest that. Okay, now, far be it from me to want to give the president any additional powers, but I think in this case, one could say at the discretion of the president.
Why don't we say candidates are responsible for providing remedy within the application period or within 24 hours of receipt of notice, whichever is later. That way, if they turn in their application and 5 days afterward, they get that notice and they're, 3 or 4 days outside the application period, they've got 24 hours to fix it.
I don't think that's unreasonable.
I think that's good.
Because
Okay.
I'd like to see 48 hours.
Okay.
People have things going on in their lives, where they have no power to react that quickly. So 48 hours would be my recommendation.
That's good too.
I'm okay with
Great.
that.
I like 48.
Great. Okay, so whichever is later.
What was
Do we
it?
want to say that let's see, so that would basically put us at 27 days minimum.
That's a lot of time.
Okay, I think that's reasonable.
The first part, whichever, 48 hours to cure or provide a remedy. or what, whichever is later? What was
Yeah.
the part?
It's on the screen right now.
Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. All right. Sounds good.
I like it.
Are also
Okay.
optimistic. It's so optimistic. Usually these seats go, no one wants them. So I like that
Yeah.
we're so worried about like the mad rush to get it all right.
All right. Anything else on this notice requirements? Do we want to include any social media notice requirements?
Can't hurt. Might as well use it. That's what we have it for.
Okay. How about all GTLNC notice?
So Ren, when all of this passes, I'm going to celebrate by putting 50 items on the agenda for you. Ren is not amused.
All right. So
Thank
that
you,
is,
Tess.
You're welcome.
that is how it reads now. Anything else that we want to include in this regarding notice, timelines, posting?
Free ice cream.
Oh, geez.
I
I'm
think
all for
we're
that.
not going to be able to do that. That's a funding motion.
Oh, damn it. All right.
All right, great. Let's go ahead and vote on motion. Let's see, that's motion E, is it? Recommend standing rule vacancies as amended for adoption by the GTLNC. How do you vote, Tess?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Ren?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Catherine's a yes as well. Motion carries 5-0-0, which brings us to new business future projects. First up is an update on the letter of action requesting city council support for legislation removing a statute of limitations for prosecuting or bringing civil suit regarding elder abuse.
I've exchanged a few calls with Lee on this, and I'm working with a, I don't know if I'd call her a legislative specialist, but someone who is pretty good about this to draft some things up. Obviously, the bylaws have been front and center for right now, but is Lee still with us? Lee and I are trading calls on this, so it's in the works, but nothing more to report at this moment other than that. And since the other item, the planned closure of the Toluca Lake Post Office is on the agenda, I'll just say that my last conversation with John Alford in Congressman Sherman's office was that, he's delegated this item to one of his staff and was supposed to get back to me, but I have not heard from him yet. So it's been 2 weeks, and he's going to get another call from me this week. So I hope to have more at our general board meeting.
I'm muted. Ren, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I got two things. One, I'd like to have Senate Bill 1100 put on our agenda for next month and probably ongoing. It's proposals to change the Brown Act, amend the Brown Act, and I think it's something our committee needs to be on top of. We may support it, oppose it, or make recommendations for new things in the language. So I just think that's something very important for us to follow. The other thing I'd like to request that we either have Jonathan made a member of our committee. He seems to operate as if he is a member of our committee. And I don't know why, unless he's not a stakeholder at all, why he can't be appointed to our committee and then, operate that way. On the other hand, I would object in the future to having him participate out of the public as someone who just comments and interacts on issues. The public is only allowed 3 minutes at the beginning and then on issues not on the agenda. And then on each agenda item, they get 3 minutes. And so I think we need to enforce that. Once we start allowing just people out of the public to start interacting on our agenda and commenting and being asked questions and so forth, that really is going to create a huge problem down the line at some point. We're creating a precedent which I don't think is appropriate or reasonable. So can we make Jonathan a member of the committee and get on with things?
I don't think we can. I think we have.
Why is that?
For the quorum of the quorum, I think we're right at the limit right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Well,
Yeah, no,
Jonathan,
Fine on that. Jonathan's not a board member.
not a board member.
Oh,
So
committee member.
At this point, it would be a question of whether or not Jonathan wants to be a member of the committee.
Yeah, that's fine. If he doesn't, then he gets his 3 minutes, period. He can't have it both ways is what I'm saying. It's going to create a huge problem down the line for other people.
Well, Ren, I would say with the greatest respect that while the precedent is an interesting argument, the chair also has the ability, and I'm a co-chair, to waive that depending on how many people wish to comment, number one, and number two. I think for all of the government affairs meetings that we've had since the discussion of bylaws commenced, I don't think we've had any more than one member of the public, Jonathan and only Jonathan, attend. So, I think the fear of setting a precedent is, in this case, unwarranted, but let's ask Jonathan if he'd like to be a member of the committee, and then the point is moot.
That's my point. If you guys make him a member of the committee, then it's moot. But if you allow members of the public to interact on a regular basis, then when we say no to some people or to everybody, then they're going to go, well, wait, last month's meeting, you allowed this guy to interact and all that. Why can't I do that? Why is he better than me? Why does what he have to say much more important than what I have to say? It creates a huge problem, I think, and it needs to be addressed. So anyway, we don't have to do it right now necessarily, but before our next meeting.
You don't have to answer, but if you want to speak now, you can. If you'd rather send us an email, Tess and my email addresses, whether or not you would like to officially join Governmental.
Thank you very much. I'll place it under consideration. In other words, let me think about it. We should be so lucky to have such problems that to go digging for problems just seems really amazing. Before you all break tonight, I just wanted to ask the board, though, all of you, to consider giving Tess and Catherine the ability to clean up language without changing the meaning of anything. For example, it says made available on the website. You may want to say things like publish on the website. Give them the ability to fix the language without changing the meanings of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I mean, we do sometimes clean up the language a little bit without changing the meaning. The issue that was discussed previously was in relation to adding a sentence that hadn't been discussed at all. Okay, do we have any other new business or requests for things to be agendized at future meetings? Hearing none, seeing none, we can go ahead and close the meeting at 8:10 p.m. All right, have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for all the hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.